Today on Pilot's Discretion, our guest is airplane designer Steve Wood. He tells us about flying a brand new sport plane to Oshkosh, designing the Cessna Caravan, and ultralights. Pilot's Discretion starts right now. Hi everyone, I'm John Zimmerman, and thanks for listening to Pilot's Discretion from Sporties. Visit sporties.com/podcast for today's show links and access to our complete archives. And remember, you can send us an email with your comments, questions, or guest ideas anytime at podcast@sporties.com. Today, I'm joined by one of the best airplane designers working today, Steve Wood. He shocked the industry at Oshkosh this summer by flying four examples of his new SE-1 single-seat sport plane to the big show in Wisconsin. It looks great and is on sale for less than $70,000 from his company, Spirit Engineering. Before Spirit, Steve worked at Cessna as an engineer in the 1970s and then was CEO of a prime contractor to the U.S. military. Somewhere in there, he found time to design the popular Skypup ultralight as well. Steve, welcome to Pilot's Discretion.
Thank you, John. Glad to be here.
So Spirit Engineering really made a splash at AirVenture this year, and I have lots of questions about the airplane, but I want to start with the business because it's pretty interesting in itself. And my first question is why? Why make a new airplane in this crowded market of light sport aircraft and GA single-engine piston airplanes? What do you think you have to bring that's different?
Well, John, I think the answer is this. When the FAA approved the ASTM standard to define light sport aircraft, and especially special light sport aircraft ready to fly airplanes, that was such a breath of fresh air to me. I was intrigued by it, and it seemed to me like an opportunity to jump in and do something that I believe needed to be done. And I assembled a small team, and I said, because many of them weren't aviation people at the time, but they were good people, and they were good, solid designers. They were good engineers. And I said, here's this opportunity. It feels like a slow-pitched ball over home plate. Somebody needs to hit this thing out of the park, frankly. And without sounding brazen, I think we're the ones to do it. We're the ones to do it because there are sort of like three planets that never align in the world of civil aviation. That is an individual or group of people who are capable of designing what I call a remarkable airplane. And by that, I mean, it's an 8.5 to 9 plus on a scale of 10 in numerous design objectives categories. And then you have to couple those people with people who understand how to manufacture a complex product to a schedule, a cost objective, and a quality standard. And then you also have to couple that to the ability to have enough, access to capital to make it to what I call critical mass in the marketplace. And I just told my guys, you guys may not believe it, but I do. We're the people to do this, and it needs to be done, so let's do it.
Well, your strategy is unique as well. You stayed quiet for many years, sounds like close to a decade, and then you flew multiple examples to Oshkosh, which is very different, if I can be honest, from the typical hype strategy that involves mock-ups or non-conforming prototypes or artists' renderings and taking deposits while the thing is still a dream in somebody's mind. So why this stealth approach and then making the big splash with the airplanes?
Well, John, you just explained it. I went to Oshkosh for the first time in 1972. I was not real old, I'll admit that. That was my very first trip, traveled all the way from western Colorado via a Fairlane Ford station wagon with a buddy of mine, and slept under the edge of a circus tent somewhere. And this was the era of the BD5. This was the era of the Sonorai, was like the latest new thing. And please understand, I'm not throwing rocks at any of those people. But my exposure to Oshkosh, and this ensued over subsequent visits to Oshkosh/AirVenture, was that, wow, there's a lot of stuff that shows up here that never happens, okay? It's a lot of postulation, it's a lot of estimation, it's a lot of extrapolation. But at the end of the day, there tends to be a large group of people either with a broken heart or they're very upset because they saw something they thought they liked and it never panned out. And so my resolve at the beginning of this project was, we're going to stay here. We're going to keep our mouths shut. We're going to take care of business. And when we know we're ready, we'll go. But before then, we're just going to stay here and stay quiet. I mean, I like the stealth approach to the market. Several people at Oshkosh this year, or AirVenture, whichever is your preference, they almost seemed a little miffed that they didn't know about this ahead of time. But I just explained to them, no, it was a very intentional. We did not want to show up until we felt like we were really ready to reveal the thing we were doing. Did I answer your question? Okay.
Absolutely. And on behalf of an industry who's gotten tired of lots of empty promises, I thank you for taking the professional and organized approach to it, because it is rare, but it is the right way to do business. So let's talk about the airplane itself. And I want to start with the looks, because it looks great. It's got, to me, some kind of Art Deco lines to it. And I'm guessing that's not accidental. I'm guessing the way it looks matters to you. So am I right, number one? And number two, if so, why do you believe the look matters?
Well, first of all, you are correct, John, that it has this sort of an Art Deco look. I observe and I opine to my team here, it almost doesn't matter which magazine you pick up, you open up an ad, and it could be for something as boring as, quick drain valves, or, like, this is a long ways from a real airplane. What is the picture? It's a guy in a leather helmet with goggles and a flowing white scarf. Why? Because there's a romance associated with aviation that is the sort of the bottom line appeal. I particularly am attracted to vintage and antique airplanes. And a lot of people that we spoke to at AirVenture said, it looks like a Ryan STA, it looks like a Globe Swift, it looks like a Hawker Hurricane, it looks like a Supermarine Spitfire. And all I could say is, well, it's just maybe a little bit of a blend of all the things that we think make a really pretty airplane. And I can tell you, John, I come into this factory every morning early, and oftentimes I'm the first one to turn on the lights, and what I see is a row of airplanes. And I know it's pretty because I've been looking at it for a long time, and every morning I look at it and go, man, that's a pretty airplane. So that's very intentional. I believe that, among all the other things that airplanes must be, they have to look good. And if they look good and they do the other stuff too, wow, that's a hard combination to beat.
So the other part that I noticed right away was the engine. Maybe that I'm just been around airplanes too long, but I saw the airplane, it looked great, and I said, I wonder what's under that cowl. And the shocking news to me is that there's a new engine. You designed not just the airplane, but the engine, an inverted V-twin that burns about 2 gallons an hour. So why did you decide to take on the additional challenge of building your own engine? And tell us more about that process.
Well, believe me, John, the decision to design and develop our own engine was not undertaken lightly. We flew a prototype an embarrassingly long time ago. I'll just tell you, like over 10 years ago, with a commercial off-the-shelf air-cooled V-twin engine that we inverted, dry sumped the thing, and developed it into what we felt like was a pretty good airplane engine. Okay. And I still believe it was. But we realized two things. One, even though the engineering department of that engine manufacturer was extremely excited about what we were doing, once you got up into Mahogany Row, we never got a cease and desist. We never got any negativity. We just got silenced, like just stone cold silence, almost as though we can buy our engines as long as you don't tell us what you're doing with them, and it'll be okay. But we became increasingly nervous because we realized that a corporate board meeting at any time could shut off a supply of engines. And we felt like we have this beautiful airplane. It's well designed. We're very excited about it. And the only way we're going to have a reliable source of a quality engine is if we are in control of that source. And that means we have to be that source. I hope that answers your question. That's sort of the bottom line. The other thing we noticed, by the time we got our third or fourth one of those engines, and we were opening them up because they were designed to run as a right side up V-twin, we were inverting them. And so we were doing some modifications to the lubrication system, plumbing, and other things. And we opened them up, and one of my guys came and said, "Hey, boss, you need to come out and look at this. They changed the piston. They changed the thrust bearing. They changed the connecting rod." And we realized then that this commercial product is going to evolve as it goes along. And what we need is a configuration that we can control and manage and define and maintain as constant and just be in control of it. So those were the driving factors. Now, I will tell you at the same time, it's kind of a deep soul search because I've developed a lot of stuff in my life, and that undertaking the development of an engine is not lightweight, work. This is a lot of work. And even if you haven't done it yet, you just know ahead of time, well, this is going to devolve into, missing a couple birthday parties and a couple of soccer games and some other things along the way, because that is the nature of that type of work. It takes a lot of long, hard days to do it. I'm not complaining. I'm not bragging. I'm just saying that's the reality of it. And so it was a tough decision, but looking back, it was the only logical decision we could make. I'm glad we made it.
So one more design decision I want to ask about, and then maybe you can share some specs on the airplane. But it's interesting to me that the airplane has folding wings. Why do you think this is an important feature on this airplane?
Well, we felt at the time, which again was quite a while ago, that storage cost was a big element for, ownership of airplanes. I mean, we really view that there are four principal elements of costs that make aircraft ownership difficult. One is acquisition cost. One is operating cost. The next one is storage cost. And the last one is maintenance cost. There's another one possibly, which is, insurance costs, we could say. We're not in control of that one as much as we are in control of the first four as designers. And so that was our mission statement. We want as low a possible acquisition costs. We want as low a possible direct operating costs. We want as low a possible storage cost. There's your folding wing. And then we wanted to make sure the maintenance cost was minimal as well. This airplane is 7 foot 5 inches wide when the wings are stowed. That's not an arbitrary number. That was based on our study of what is the trailer width that's allowable in 49 of the 50 states of the United States, with the possible exception of Rhode Island. And, sorry, guys in Rhode Island, you just need to go to a different state to haul your airplane around. But we viewed that it needs to fit in a car hauler, toy hauler, V-nose, snowmobile trailer, whatever. It needs to fit in a trailer that's out there and comfortably fit within the door opening without being a problem. How's that? Did I answer?
Absolutely. So to me, this is clearly an airplane designed for recreational use. This is not something you're going to fly across the country, although to be fair, you did that going to Oshkosh. But on the subject of recreational or fun airplanes, do you think the GA industry in general needs more purely fun airplanes? Are we too focused on practicality?
Oh, I absolutely believe it. I mean, John, I'm a guy that's been flying for, a long time. I think I soloed 52 years ago last month. Okay. I've been at it for a while. And to me, flying is one of those magical things we get to do. It's one of the most free things we get to do. I've done it as an element of business travel. I've done it to spot elk. I've done it to do a lot of different things. But honestly, the most enjoyable times that I've had flying are just flying recreationally. It's a little bit of the lower and slower. We live over a beautiful piece of the Earth's geography, and it's just fun to fly over it, see it.
And so tell me the perfect mission for this airplane and some of the specs involved. Can I take it off from a grass runway? How fast can I fly? Can I actually carry a full-size American pilot these days? Tell me about if I am lucky enough to buy one of these airplanes, what can I do with it?
Wow, John, I'll try and remember all those and answer them, hopefully as serial order. As you pointed out a few minutes ago, our original conception was this is a recreational airplane. We believe this is a Saturday morning airplane. You and your buddies are going to go off to breakfast somewhere. But I've made this point in a couple of interviews. I took the original prototype up to Seattle. I took it back to Wichita to see some of my Cessna folks, and I don't know how to describe it. It's just such a wonderful feeling to be slipping along over the country at about 2 gallons of gas an hour, making pretty decent time. Like, the Priuses below you are not doing what you're doing right now. And yet you have everything with you in the airplane that you need to make this trip. So I would even argue it's sort of evolved, at least in my thinking, to be, no, it's fun to travel with. John, I just got back, as you well know, a couple of hours ago from delivering an airplane down to Texas, down to the Austin area. I flew from Grand Junction, Colorado to just northwest of Austin on 14.6 gallons of gas.
Amazing.
Now, admittedly, I had an easterly heading, so I was making pretty good time because I had a tailwind. The return trip, the fuel economy wouldn't have been quite as tremendous, but that averages out to something like 1.85 gallons of gas per hour. And I've told a lot of people, if I need to make your operating costs lower than that, I don't know what to tell you. You need to take up hang gliding, or you need to do something that doesn't consume fuel, because that's a lot of performance on a very economical basis. I had 2 fuel stops, by the way. I flew 3 legs. Each of them were about 2 hours and 45 minutes, which is, it's just a comfortable amount of time to be in the air. Stopped, topped off, hopped back in, kept going. It's a great trip. It's going to be one of my great, memories of my flying career.
Sounds fantastic.
Which questions didn't I answer? Because I think I left several hanging.
Well, how fast can I go and how much can I carry?
It cruises at honest 100 miles per hour on 2 gallons an hour. And that's even true down close to sea level. All right, say 75% power. This engine has a redline RPM of 3,000, and probably the mean recommended cruising RPM is about 2,700. That's what I ran all the way from Colorado down to Texas the other day. And you're doing 100, 101, 102. If you're willing to burn another 1/10 of a gallon an hour, well, hey, step it up a couple miles an hour. It's not going to make that much difference. It holds 8 gallons of gas, and I think that's quite adequate. For the most part, if you were airborne more than 3.5 hours or so, most of us are ready to get out, stretch our legs, get a sip of water, maybe visit the restroom, those types of things. But John, I just never tire of flying over this beautiful place where we live. It's just gorgeous. I love seeing it from the air.
Couldn't agree more. And I think most pilots know that feeling. It's hard to describe sometimes, but when you've been there, it's a wonderful feeling.
Yes, it is.
My last question is, it's a single seat. So how do I learn to fly this thing? Are we going back to World War II days where I checked myself on it? What's your advice for somebody transitioning?
Well, I was asked this question a lot. We as a team have been asked this question a lot. And sort of my pat answer so far has been and still remains, show me 3 good landings in Aluscum, and I think you're going to get this airplane and do fine. It is a light airplane, and it has light control forces. But many people transitioning, say, from a Champ or Taylorcraft or Cub into a Luscombe, my advice to them would be, hey, whatever you were used to doing in the Cub, like cut it in half, okay? How far you're moving the controls, how much force you're putting on the controls. And I think this is even another notch lighter than that. So I'm not claiming that it's challenging or anything. I'm just saying there's not a lot of people who have flown a 450 pound airplane. That's a light airplane. Everyone who flies it just raves about the harmony of the controls, and they love the handling and all that kind of thing. But when you start that first takeoff roll, you don't need to be moving your feet 2 or 3 inches to maintain runway center line. You need to be moving them, a fraction of that, and similar on rollout.
All right, Steve, let's take a quick break. And when we come back, I want to ask you about your Cessna days. Hey pilots, let's be honest. Once you pass your check ride, flying isn't just about checklists and maneuvers. It's about making smart decisions and adjusting when things don't go as planned. That's where VFR and IFR Mastery from Pilot Workshops come in. Every month, you'll get brand new flying scenarios, one for VFR pilots and one for IFR pilots, designed to challenge your decision-making skills in a safe, risk-free environment. Led by Pilot Workshops' award-winning team of flight instructors, these scenarios focus on practical flying tips and real-world strategies that make you a more confident, more prepared pilot. Whether it's handling tricky weather, navigating unexpected airspace issues, or making tough go, no-go calls, Mastery helps sharpen the skills you actually use in the cockpit. It's more than just reading an article or watching a video. It's a multi-step, interactive experience that even includes a community section where you can talk with other pilots about their decision-making process. I've been a panelist for Mastery, and I can tell you it's one of the most educational and fun experiences of my aviation career. So I invite you to join thousands of other pilots who rely on these expert insights to stay sharp. Sign up for a free trial of VFR or IFR Mastery today at pilotworkshops.com and take your flying to the next level. That's pilotworkshops.com. Now, back to Pilot's Discretion. We are back with Steve Wood, who began his aviation engineering career at Cessna in the 1970s, working at the Pawnee Division, where single-engine airplanes were made. Steve, many people consider this to be the glory days of piston airplanes and tremendous production volumes and all that. So what was it like working at Cessna back in those days, especially for our listeners who weren't even born then? What was Cessna in the 1970s like?
Well, it was a lot of fun. John, my father saved the Wall Street Journal for me the day I graduated from college as an aero engineer. And the number one recruited job at that time was aero engineering.
Wow.
Like my timing was good. 5 years earlier, they would have said, you might get a good job pumping gas somewhere if you had an aero engineering degree. But I only interviewed 2 places, Beechcraft and Cessna. Beech offered me a little more money. Cessna looked like more fun. I went to Cessna. And this is, graduate from college, get married, move clear across the country and start a new job all in the space of, a few weeks, which sort of makes your head swim today. But I arrived there in the, mid to late 70s at Cessna, and things were booming. I mean, we literally could not build airplanes fast enough. I did not double check this number, but I think this is true. They built something like 17,000 airplanes. I mean, big numbers, man. I mean, unimaginable numbers today. And I think, we could digress and talk about a lot of the dynamics of why that was happening right then. My personal opinion is it was a couple things. An awful lot of the masses of pilots who were trained during World War II had just reached a point in their lives when they could, either individually or through their business acquire an airplane. But let's just say Cessna was absolutely booming. We had 25 active certification programs with the FAA at the time that I was there. So there was a lot going on. It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of great people that I worked with. It was just, it's just all wonderful memories to me.
Yeah, those are unbelievable numbers. I think Cessna built more airplanes in 78, 79 than they built in, the next 10 years combined, or some stat like that. It's truly hard to understand.
You're right.
But I know probably a highlight there was that you get to do a lot of work on the Cessna Caravan, which is still very much flying to this day, a unique airplane that in some ways kind of defined a new category of light airplane. So what was it like working on that project, and what were some of the challenges you had to overcome with a kind of a utility single engine turboprop like that?
Yeah. Well, you got to remember, this was the Pawnee division. So first of all, we had never done a turbine engine of any type. That was new to us. We had done the T303 Crusader, which I was involved in as well, both in engineering test and to some degree of design. But by the time, this was kind of in some ways, John, it was a little bit sad. I think when I got to Pawnee Engineering, I want to say there was something like 335 people in engineering when I hired on there. Okay. And I think the day I left, it was around 50 people. It was really a skeleton crew. A lot of the, big, long rooms full of drafting tables and things that previously had been, beehive level activity. They no longer look like that. They were sort of ghost towns. So that aspect of it was kind of sad. There were a lot of design reviews and preliminary design involved with the 208. That's what I call the Caravan. It was a 208. Originally, believe it or not, it was going to be a tailwheel airplane. And marketing said, no, we don't think so. But its mission was it needed to be able to, go to third world countries and operate with minimal maintenance equipment in many regards and run on JP4. So we didn't think anything of it at the time. John, within the last year, I looked up in Wikipedia, and it's sort of like, well, the design of the Cessna Caravan is almost legendary, how fast it happened, because they dropped the hanky and said, start the design, I think in November of 81. And the airplane, the first prototype, flew in December of 82, 13 months later. Hard to imagine. And it was a very small crew of people that were involved in the design, development, and testing of that. And so, I look back, and I'm very glad that I was. I look back and I realize, I got to rub shoulders a little bit with Dwayne Wallace. Even though he wasn't involved on a day-to-day basis, he was revered. And Dwayne would sit in the back of a design review meeting with his slide rule, just making sure everyone was telling the truth, because he knew all the formulas. And he wouldn't let anybody get away with making outrageous claims about it.
That's interesting.
And I've never flown a 208. I would love to, but I've never had a chance to.
Well, I've got 0.6 hours in one. And of course, the first thing I did was take it into a grass strip. And I can tell you it's a wonderful design. And it's basically like flying a 182. If you can fly a 182, you can fly a Caravan. That's at least in my expert opinion. All right, Steve, we always like to finish Pilot's Discretion with a lightning round called Ready to Copy. So I'll ask some rapid fire questions on a wide range of topics, and you read back with your quick answer. You ready to copy?
Okay. I think I'm ready, John.
What is a mistake most airplane designers make at least once in their careers?
Well, I think the principal one that comes to my mind, and again, your audience needs to understand, I had no clue what you were about to ask me. Design for manufacturability. There, so many times someone makes a beautiful prototype of very, very aerodynamic and wonderful looking airplane, and maybe even high performance, and no consideration has been given to how to reproduce that thing on a consistent basis. So I think for an airplane to proliferate, it needs to be designed with manufacturability at right at the core, right at the beginning. It has to be there.
Speaking of proliferating, you designed the Skypup, a unique and successful ultralight that has been around for many years now. What are you most proud of with that airplane?
Well, John, I just marvel that people are still building it. I mean, even one of my goals at the time was, if you really want to get in the air for the least financial investment possible, but in a safe manner, here's a set of plans. Go build this ultralight, and you're going to have a safe airplane that you're going to have a lot of fun with and go fly. And that was my goal clear back in, oh, good heavens, what was it, 82, somewhere along in there, designing the airplane and building the prototype. And even today, it still has a very faithful following. It's just, it's a minimalist airplane, possibly one of the easiest to fly airplanes that it's 2-axis. It is extremely easy to fly. Bit of a fair weather airplane because it has extremely light wing loading. But one of the most pleasing things to me, John, is I have a stack of letters stowed away from people who said, you fulfilled my dream. I always wanted to fly. I couldn't afford to fly. You designed the Skypup. I was an RC airplane builder, and only because I wanted to fly real airplanes, but I couldn't afford to do it. And once you came out with the Skypup, I could afford to do it. And they just loved it, So that's been extremely gratifying. Still is.
That's the best type of fan mail. Talking about the SE1, what is a small design detail there that you would like more pilots to notice if they ever get a chance to fly one?
Wow. Well, you've already mentioned the folding wing. One of my, I don't know if I can name just one, John, but I'll do my best. Through the design of the airplane, I told the team, first of all, when someone sees this airplane from a distance, I want them to be drawn to it like moths to flame. All right. Like your feet just start walking toward it because it's pretty. It's eye-catching. It's shiny. It's wonderful to look at, that Art Deco thing you mentioned earlier. But I also don't want it to be disappointing from very close up. And I think, anyone who has done design and development work, if they move in real close, and I'm talking a foot away, 2 feet away, or even inches away, and study the SE1, they're going to go, wow, there's nothing on this airplane that wasn't thought through very, carefully. Like they didn't run with the first idea they had here. They stayed there and they camped out until they felt like they had the best concept. I preach to my people all the time that you can ruin, a great concept with poor execution, but the reverse is not true. If the concept is not great to begin with, no level of execution will turn it into anything other than a glorified sowsier at the end of the day. That's just the nature of all design. Doesn't matter if it's airplanes or anything else. And so it's very accessible. I mean, I'm trying to give you the answer. It has very big access panels, right around the pilot's calf area. What most people refer to as, the worst part of an airplane to work on. Like I got to get to the front side of the instrument panel, or I got to remove all the seats and lay on my back upside down with the trouble light and try and work on something up front in the cabin area or the cockpit area. This one is designed so that you can stick your head and shoulders in from the side, and you can see everything to do with the rudder controls, the brake controls, the fuel controls. I mean, it's very accessible. We really concentrated on that maintainability aspect. And I think I'm predicting that mechanics will like it a lot. My goal has been, I want any aircraft mechanic who ever touches this airplane to say, man, that was the nicest maintenance experience I ever had, because everything was so easy to get to. It was so accessible. It was so easy to inspect, or, if something needed adjustment or replacement, it's not hidden. It's not way in a dark corner somewhere, hard to get to.
So the airplane looks great, but it's polished aluminum. And that takes work. Do you have any tips for polishing an airplane?
John, 3 of the airplanes we brought to Oshkosh, first of all, they were not polished. And here's the evidence. Go look at the heads of the rivets. They're still tan. They're not shiny aluminum anymore. One of the airplanes we brought to Oshkosh was entirely polished, 112 Sierra Echo. The other 3 were not. And frankly, we all favor the 3 that weren't, because they just have mill finish, alclad aluminum. That's the skin. By the way, it's all alclad 2024. There's no 6061 in the thing. We happen to live out in the desert. All right. I'm just going to be honest with you. We're in Western Colorado where, if we're lucky, we get 9 inches of precipitation a year. And so the relative humidity is low. We don't have salt fog or any of those things to deal with. Life is easy out here. All we will do to these airplanes is maybe take some Windex and clean the bugs off the leading edge after we fly them, and they're just going to look the same for years and years. Someone in a more humid or maybe aggressive environment is going to have to do a little bit of polish work. We like the Nuvite products, honestly, but I'll just tell you, I don't mind an alclad aluminum airplane that takes on a little bit of oxidation patina over its life. It's when I was a kid, John, like none of the Luscombs or Cessna 140s or Cessna 170s or none of those airplanes were polished. They were just aluminum. They were bare. They weren't painted other than trim stripes. But I don't mind that look at all, and that's why 2024 is clad with pure aluminum. So that it has that protective layer.
If you could snap your fingers and solve one aeronautical engineering problem, define physics and economics instantly, what would that problem be?
Wow, that's a tough one. Boy, I hope you didn't totally stump me there. There's so many factors at play. I mentioned manufacturability. I think that designing a great airplane involves a balance between all these things. I think it was Laszlo Pazman that said the best design is the best compromise of the desired objectives. Okay. And all design involves compromise. If it didn't, airplanes would weigh nothing. They would go infinitely fast and they wouldn't burn any fuel. But that's not reality. Reality is, no, we have to live within the laws of physics. And, boy, that is a tough one. I mean, yeah, if we could make gravity reduce or something, life would get a lot easier. But I don't think that's a law of physics. That's a law of the universe we're talking about there. We just try to, John, I think time will tell whether, our formula, and I've said this to several people, we're not putting our SE1 out there and saying, this is the be all end all. We're saying, this is what we, as a group of designers, believed was the best way to address the 4, principal cost of ownership elements that I described earlier, and we're just awfully excited about it. We think it's a great solution. I look around, I say, well, what's out there competing with it? There are faster airplanes, but not to burn less than 2 gallons an hour, or it has startlingly good high altitude performance. We developed it in high altitudes. We live at 5,000 feet, and an awful lot of the developmental work has been done at density altitudes of 8,000-9,000 feet or higher. And so it's just a refined thing.
Is the Cessna 303, which you mentioned earlier, is it underrated or overrated in 2025? It's a fairly rare airplane, but they're out there. Is it a good airplane or bad airplane?
Oh, it's a great airplane, the T303. I got there, John. I got to Cessna right as they were scrubbing the original 303, which very few people even know about. Cessna regrettably had bought into the GAW airfoil. I won't say hoax, but they believed that they could get away with a shorter span, narrower chord, less wing area because this GAW airfoil, which was all the rage, in the mid to late 70s. And I think I had been at Cessna about 2 weeks when they announced no more 303. And then like the next Monday, we started the T303 Crusader, which was a cabin class twin. Excellent airplane. By the way, it had the lowest landing load factor of any Cessna ever. Had a trailing link gear. You couldn't make a bad landing in it because it just cushed out. You could set up a steep, high rate of descent, fly it right down to the runway. Marketing loved it because when they were demoing it to people, even pilots who weren't very good could make an awful nice landing in a T303. But it just hit the market at a really bad time. It came out in 81, 82, and the market was starting to tank. And so not many of them were made, and it's kind of sad. The few that I know of that people own, they love them, and they take care of them, and they really appreciate them. But
All right, so you're an engineer, but also a very successful businessman as well. So I'm wondering if there is an engineering mindset that can be applied to running the business, as opposed to some people talk about finance versus engineering CEOs or lawyers versus product guys, whatever it is. And without getting into that whole debate, your career in business and engineering, what are the valuable crossovers there?
wow, that's another tough one. Let me tell you this, John. I sort of look at my professional career in three phases. When I got out of school, well, first of all, if you back me up just like 7 years old, said, what do you want to be when you grow up? And then you asked me at 9 and 12 and 15, it never changed. I wanted to be an aero engineer. That's all I ever wanted to be. And I was foolish enough to think every kid around me knew what they wanted to be when they grew up. I found out later, no, a lot of them, they hit 20 or maybe even 40 and they still hadn't decided what they wanted to be when they grew up. But I was fortunate. I knew I had a passion about it. And I would say, when I graduated, man, if it didn't fly, I didn't want much to do with it. It needed to be aviation. Later on, I got involved in, a DoD business, contracting business, and I found a similar, I wouldn't say quite as good, but a similar level of satisfaction and enjoyment from just doing, design and development of other things, not just things that flew, and oftentimes even just the manufacturing processes for those things. Sometimes we did what I would call build to print, meaning, no, this is something that's been around for a while. Our chance to be novel was to do it in a different way, to approach the manufacturing of it in a unique way that others hadn't, and hopefully, have a cost advantage over them, because most of the contracting we did was firm fixed price. So if you don't have the best price, you're an also ran, and then I would say, at some point along there, I sort of developed an interest in business for its own sake. My wife would be one to attest to this. We could go into a restaurant, maybe a new restaurant. I could say, honey, you need to enjoy this meal because this place isn't going to be open a year from now. And she'd look at me and say, what are you talking about? I say, just do the math. Look how many square feet are here. What's the lease, or what's the, what is this costing them to occupy the space? What's the head count of people here? What's the average pay of the people here? How many paying customers are here? What are they paying for a meal? You could do the math and say, this is either someone's hobby or pipe dream, but it's not going to last. And so I became, I won't say enamored, but certainly interested in business in a way that I wasn't when I was, 23 years old and right out of school. When I was at Cessna and we went to the meetings where they told, all the production numbers, I care about that. I was interested in landing load factors and how many G's the T303 wing would hold and all those sorts of things. But later, I think I developed a little bit more of a balance. Like, you have to have all those factors balanced against each other to have something that is sustainable and successful.
All right, Steve, our last question is always the same in this podcast. You have one final flight. We want to know, what are you flying and where are you going?
This may sound odd. If my SE1 flight from Western Colorado to Austin, Texas was my last flight, wow. It was gorgeous. I mean, I'm going over the Rockies at 13.5. They're gorgeous to look at. All of our country's gorgeous to look at. And I'm moving along, sipping gas, and I'm just thinking, I landed, maybe I already said this, I landed Raton, New Mexico. People came up to look at the airplane, and they said something like, what a gorgeous day. And I said, I'm just not jealous of anybody. This is like, I just feel blessed that I get to do this. I just feel so fortunate that I get to do it. Not a very dramatic answer. I could throw in there, I'd love to fly a Spitfire. Haven't flown a Spitfire. I'd love to, but I could have my ultimate flight in about anything, I think.
Enjoy your next flight like it might be your last flight. Not bad advice for a happy life as a pilot. So, Steve, thanks so much for being on the podcast.
John, such a pleasure. Thank you.
Thanks for listening to Pilot's Discretion, brought to you by Sporties, training and equipping pilots worldwide for over 60 years. For more episodes and today's show links, visit sporties.com/podcast. I'm John Zimmerman. We'll see you next time on Pilot's Discretion.